and most welcome to 1773. It looks like an important year. I can't think of what would have happened 1773. Let me think. The ascendancy of the king, maybe? Gustavus III. Was that in 1773? Don't remember, gee. Something happened. Could have been then. I think that's when he made himself more powerful. The Warren D. Goldfarb article continues to fascinate until that last bit of understanding has come. I think that will be quite hard to resist. And what it points to is once more, well, I think a good start to understanding is to looking at, I know we now realized Wittgenstein do not seek to contradict Augustinus in any way, but to see him as such. I think that's the only way of, in the beginning, to understand what's to make the Wittgensteinian, or reduce it even to a position, an opinion, because we are so used to opinions, so that could in the beginning be the only way in, so to speak. Augustine's remarks seem correct as long as the picture is behind it. I think that could be the most important takeaway of the previous lecture, 1772. The trouble comes, and this is well to remember, the trouble comes when we segment the description. That is, we take naming, wishing to point, and so on, as if they picked out isolatable phenomena whose character can be given independently of any surrounding structure. This idea of surroundings is connected to why the double aspect of Augustine's remarks arises in philosophical contexts. To take the notions Augustine invokes as figuring in a general account of language is to take them as picking out particular phenomena that are crucially, perhaps foundationally, at stake in the operation of language, these phenomena in and of themselves then become the focus of theorizing. Thus, for example, in paragraph 6, Wittgenstein talks of the connection between word and thing. His remarks there are intended not to deny that attributions of reference to words make sense, but rather to expose a slide that results in giving the word-thing connection a special place underlying the use of language as the essential item in the explanation of understanding. When this sort of thing happens, the notions are construed as operating on their own, independently of the rest of the structure. For it is they that ground the structure. It wouldn't be anything. You would have a house of cards if you don't have the surroundings, the context, the doings, all the connections and the doings. Otherwise, the words will fall flat. For it is they that ground the structure. How true. Our considerations about paragraph 2 thus suggest that what is involved in undertaking such a general accounts is already a large move. In his investigations of the notions that can play a role here, Wittgenstein intends to give this altogether too broad characterization content by teasing out the ways in which these notions are illicitly taken as separable when exploited for certain ends. Now, one lesson we are to learn from Wittgenstein is that there is no accurate general characterization of how one can go wrong. We can expect no systematic account on what it is to treat notions in isolation from the surroundings that ordinarily give them life. Further insight can be gained only by detailed examination of cases. I shall consider one such examination, that in paragraphs 19 to 20, which poses the question of how words are meant. In paragraphs 19 and 20, Wittgenstein examines what I have called the notion of the animation of language by thought, by looking at the relations among the builders called Slab, our command Slab, and our sentence, "Bring me a slab." Here, he is using our hesitations regarding the language of paragraph 2 to raise questions about our language, and in particular about what our meaning, our words consist in. It disperses the fog to consider the builders. Not because such primitive languages settle anything directly, but because they force certain questions back on us. The things the interlocutor says in these sections have a very commonplace air. Our order Slab is elliptical for "bring me a slab." When I say slab, I mean bring me a slab, and when I say slab, I want that you should bring me a slab, and so on. Wittgenstein does not deny these commonplaces, but seeks to show that the interlocutor, in taking them to evidence something deep about language, is putting them on a burden they cannot bear. The interlocutor starts by claiming that the builder's call is not our command, since our command is elliptical for Bring me a slab. He is trying to locate our uneasiness with the builders in something specific about their calls, as opposed to our sentences. That is, in something finer than the overarching fact that the builders' lives are, after all, different from ours. Wittgenstein agrees that our one-word command is elliptical, as it surely is. But how does this humdrum observation show a difference between it and the builder's call? The interlocutor responds that the conclusion follows simply because the builder's language does not contain the longer sentence. The interlocutor must then be construing the ellipticality of our command slab for "bring me the slab" to imply that the functioning of the former is parasitic on that of the latter. He conceives of our one-word command as a conventionally shortened form of the real sentence. Bring me the slab. Something is left out in the former, and we are in some way more accurate when we put it back in by filling in the ellipsis. He is claiming that any account on what we do with the shortened sentence must go by way of the longer one. Our command slab can function as it does only because it is at bottom the longer sentence. The interlocutor here is headed towards a philosophical theory of language. Agreement with his characterization of the relation between the shorter and longer sentences will rapidly drive towards the idea of there being a full sense of our sentences, or proposition, as some have put it, versus what is obtained when all of the ellipses have been filled in. To block this drive at the start, Wittgenstein will call our attention to the ways in which the notion of ellipticality, when construed in this way, is groundless. Thus he asks, with an innocent why don't we take the one-word command as the basic form and the longer sentence to be conventionally lengthened? Why is the longer sentence to be taken as standard? The interlocutor answers that it is because you really mean the longer sentence when you utter the shorter sentence. Again, in one tone of voice, this is triviality. The interlocutor, however, is in effect emphasizing really, and is thereby voicing the deep-seated conviction that the longer sentence has some sort of priority. He is construing really meaning as a relation to something. The something here is the longer sentence as opposed to the shorter. In the philosophical, not so long run, that something turns out to be the full sense, or the thought in its entirety, which may well go beyond the sentence as uttered. To point out the need for some support for taking such talk of really meaning as showing that one form of the sentence is more basic than the other, Wittgenstein dismissively asks, do you say the unshortened sentence to yourself? The answer is, of course, no. All that can be concluded is that the two sentences mean the same, and that the shorter one, shorter. Wittgenstein even asks, why should I not say, when he says slab, he means slab? Now, we normally do not say such things, Perhaps then we should pause at this question, for it suggests that the interlocutor could point out the following. We say, when he says slab, he means bring me a slab, but not when he says slab, he means slab. Nor do we say, when he says bring me a slab, he means slab. Surely, this shows that the longer sentence is a more accurate locus of meaning. But how does this show that? We say, when he says X, he means Y. In response to a question, when something about the utterance is unclear. It is hard to imagine a case in which we would be unclear about. Bring me a slab, yet would have understood had slab been said. Hence, the shorter sentence is not, in general, useful for explaining the longer. This is an innocent observation, but the interlocutor concludes that the shorter sentence depends on the longer one. Of course, there's a jump here that amounts to an implicit adoption of an in-choate conception of full sense. For the full sense represents the complete explanation of meaning, the one that handles any unclarity that could possibly arise. The assumption of such a final resting point provides a notion of direction of analysis. It is this notion that founds the interlocutor's claim that bring me a slab is more basic than slab, which is odd. Now, Wittgenstein criticizes this conception in many ways. He challenges the idea of complete explanation and all possible unclarities, and denies that question and doubts elicit something already there. Somehow in the original sentence. These criticisms, however, need not to be rehearsed here. For the present task is to show that the observations we make about meaning, when we stick to the descriptive level, do not by themselves substantiate the interlocutor's claim. Interlocutor's claims. If these claims are substantiated only when we import a conception of full sense or something tantamount to it, a philosophical picture of the essence of language is ever there were one, then that is enough. Let's have a look see at Johnston here, because this is also deeply connected to aspect blindness. The longer and shorter should be compared to the mathematical ennumbering of, for instance, 1, 3, 7, 9, and 11 and so forth, where you understand that there is an equation or some sort of thing behind it. Once you realize that, it doesn't really, in some ways, in some other ways it does matter, but in some way the length do no longer matter. You might need the longer mathematical ennumbering until you understand what's behind. Maybe it's x plus 2 or x times 2, so forth. And then you have the object. You perceive something which is not disjunct from your understanding. Your knowledge is deeply connected to what you perceive, what is out there. Out there-ness is not unconnected to you. It is neither connected, which also makes it even more, I'd say, fascinating. So listen about meaning here and what we said earlier, that these words or concepts are not to be working in isolation. In relation to meaning, there's a puzzling phenomenon, because when we repeat a word in isolation, its meaning may seem to drain away, but the meaning is the use of the word. How can it drain away? Why do we talk about words being full of their meaning if words are just things we use? In both cases, pictures and words, our relationship is not purely functional nor utilitarian. we do not just use words and pictures. We have experiences in relation to them. Wittgenstein actually goes down a blind alley in developing the concept of meaning blindness. Since in some remarks, I think Johnston had, he implies that a meaning blind person would not say, when you said Bob, I thought you meant my father Bob, not your brother-in-law Bob. He suggests this because the meaning blind person is supposed to be someone who can use words but does not experience meaning as we do. However, he quickly recognizes his mistake and accepts that a meaning blind person would be able to tell us what he meant when he said the word X, or what he thought you meant when you said the word Bob, etc. So you can think of the elongation of the number series also to the elongation of the complexity of the world, the many connections that we have here. And this is also connected to acute and chronic aspect seeing. The acute one is the very realization. And that could be that you come from a perspective that is so, let's just imagine, it's so ingrained of abstract thinking. So you need to think it in terms because of your habit, how it's done in your neck of the woods. You need to hear, could you give me a slab? And then you hear the builders using only slab, and it takes a while until it sort of hits you. After it becomes chronic, you can no longer say that the longer one is the one you need. But it's a very good question that opens up a lot when you compare the longer with the shorter. I think that is of immense importance. It shows to that we have an underlying picture that is actually quite odd. And this oddity is the first little scratch that makes us realize we have a tick somewhere, and we need to get, if we don't get rid of it, the realizing you have it, in the same time it will disappear. We do not have to do anything else. It's an amazing discovery only this far. Goldfarb had taken me to the edge of the picture, and that is in itself enormously interesting. But I can imagine how it is if you go further and you can almost sort of sense the picture. Johnston is helpful here to clarify what is the purpose from Wittgenstein's point of view of bringing in aspect blindness into the scheme. What is the reason? How does it help? What does it do? And what does it bring to the understanding? So the aspect blind and the meaning blind would in some way also be immune to the underlying picture. And here, be clear, I use the term picture in two completely different ways. The underlying picture is not an image in the ordinary way. And I think my batteries is running out here prematurely. I say thank you very much. Have a very pleasant morning, afternoon, or evening, or whatever you are having. Until next time, we will continue to dig even deeper into Warren D. Goldfarb's very interesting article. Bye-bye for now.